going on? It's Kevin Kenny. Welcome to the Build series. Our next guest has been described as one of the most innovative creative forces of his generation and joins us on Build for the first time ever today. Please let's give a round of applause for Jacob Collier. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
That's the longest applause we've had all week.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, one record right out of the way.
That's lovely. Thanks.
Welcome to Build for the first time ever.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
This is really cool. Well, you know what's funny? I just want to talk about this really quick. We were saying in the back that this used to be at Tower Records, if you guys didn't know. And we've had guests before that said this is the first time, you know, back in the day when it was a Tower, that they'd ever seen their music in a store. Do you have a story like that, or the first time you ever saw a piece of your music?
It was in Tokyo, actually.
Really?
It was in Tokyo, yeah, which is a long way from home. I'm from London.
Of course.
And yeah, there's a sort of Tower Records equivalent there, I suppose. And I went right up to the 10th floor, and I was walking around. It's like, that is me. That's my face. That's my face on a shelf. How bizarre.
Did you hesitate? Did you almost like not even think it was you at first?
Yeah, you do this double take thing. You think,
Yeah.
that's not, I don't think that's right, you know. And then there's their pair of headphones, and it's plugged into the music, and I listened to it, and I thought, I did mix that song. So
Yeah.
I think it's me.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally.
Surreal.
Well, what's exciting about having you here for the first time ever is we kind of get to do a bit of an introduction to the audience, right, that may not be familiar with your music. And for you, it really, I guess, in the modern sense, it all started on YouTube. Is that fair to say? Is that how you would describe the journey?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
For sure.
so you're 25 now, right?
True.
How old are you when you started making YouTube videos?
I guess it was about 10 years ago. I was about 16.
Okay.
I was so fascinated with music as a language, and I didn't really think about having a career until it sort of happened by accident, I suppose. So I was involved in understanding and experimenting with musical harmony specifically, and also rhythm, melody, sound, all sorts of things, music basically. And thank you. And yeah, so I began to visualize the things I was recording. I would record multiple layers, you know, all these different layers, whether it's percussions or bass instruments or guitars or piano. And I wasn't brilliant at these instruments, but I wanted to explore them thoroughly. And so I would build up these tracks at home. I have a wonderful room at home in London. And I stole my sister's iPod, or I actually borrowed my sister's iPad. And I would put it in different positions in the room and play these instruments, and I'd film the thing. And then I managed to get my hands on a copy of Final Cut Express. So I wouldn't advise using necessarily, even though Final Cut now is excellent. At the time, Final Cut Express was a bit gnarly. But I would sit and I would create these visualizations for the sound, put them on YouTube, because that's what people were doing at that time. And you know, I was challenging myself as much as I could. I was pushing my brain, I was extending my ideas as far as they would go. And a lot of the harmonies were quite bonkers, you know, and I was interested in pushing it further and further and further. And so that process of learning, I suppose, was one I enjoyed sharing with people, just kind of for fun. And then one day, you know, a video I made, it was an arrangement of a Stevie Wonder song called Don't You Worry About a Thing. And it's one of those stories where it just kind of exploded. It was like, you know, and overnight it got sort of hundreds of thousands of views, and it was a really surreal moment, and it was lovely. It was like, oh, that's cool, that's really nice. And then I just sort of kept going. I didn't really think about anything changing. It was more that, you know, now more people were interested in listening. But I received an email from Quincy Jones, for example, and also Herbie Hancock, and they're two sort of giants of music, like huge heroes of mine. And so just to sort of connect with those guys and become friends with them was mega cool. It was like the stuff of dreams. But I knew I wanted to continue to explore music and learn about music, and I wanted to do things on my own and do things my own way. And that's kind of what I'm still doing, which is awesome.
Yeah. When you get an email from Quincy Jones, I mean, is there any party he goes, there's no way this is Quincy Jones?
Oh,
This
yeah,
is spam.
Yeah, there are a few parts of me that did that.
So how do you verify it's Quincy when you get you open the email inbox, it says Quincy Jones?
Yeah, well, I didn't really believe it was him until we scheduled a Skype call, and then I got on Skype, and there he was. And
There he was.
I was like, I can't argue with that, you know. And it was cool because the nice thing was, you know, he just wanted to talk about music. He was like, well, what are the chords in this bit of the song? You know, can you show me the chords? I was like, yeah. And it's this, and he's like, oh yeah, there's like a minor ninth interval in there, and I was like, yeah, there is. And he's a remarkable human being because he's never stopped learning, but he started as a real lover of the science of music. He was a jazz arranger, and took that knowledge into pop, you know, when he was in his 50s with Michael Jackson, and even before that. He's done so much, and so just to become friends with him is really inspiring because there hasn't been a moment, I think, where he's thought, well, now I'm Quincy Jones, so I can stop learning. It's just been like, well, if I'm Quincy Jones, that means I'm learning. And he's defined himself around that structure, that study, that kind of emotional study, and the people that have made the music and becoming friends with and connecting with those people has been really important to him as well.
So we, of course, everybody, I think if you're a fan of popular music, you know Quincy Jones, you know he's regarded as one of the greats of all time. Of course, you know, did Thriller back in the 80s with Michael. You, though, with such a deep understanding and knowledge of music, what makes him so great, in your words? We know.
It's well, as he would say, he wouldn't say this about himself, but he would say that the best music is a balance of science and soul. And so there's a certain amount of understanding the language of what it is you're putting together. And that doesn't mean going to musical theory class for 20 years and learning all of your counterpoint things and blah, blah, blah. It can mean that. But really, it's just about emotionally connecting with the concepts you're using. And so if you have a chord, for example, then what notes are in the chord and what does each note do in the chord? It's a lovely exercise. You know, like if you take out a note and sing it instead of playing it, then what does it do? How does it feel to be the third, to be the sixth, to be the 11th? And I personally didn't really put labels on these sounds until quite late in my teens. But that the process of studying the music by listening really, really carefully to it was so cool for me. And Quincy, the reason I think Quincy is on this pedestal for me personally is just that he got that stuff together so early and he was so deep in it, and then was not afraid to take that understanding into spaces beyond the understanding. You know, because some people understand things for a living and maybe become teachers or stay within their own sort of psychological wonderlands and think, oh, it's great, and I can go down and down and down into the absolute depths of the knowledge, which is a very important part of learning. But Quincy did that, and then he went out and he brought everybody in, and so he kind of universalized many different parts of musical language that weren't in that style of music in the past, and made them not just accessible but hip.
Yeah.
And that's like superhero status for a musiker like me.
I want to zero in on this idea of a balance of science and soul. And when you're creating music, it must be such a fine line. Do you ever find yourself leaning too far in one direction?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I don't think about that balance when I'm creating. I think about that balance when I'm thinking, and conceptualizing, I suppose. Because when you come to make a song or make an arrangement, you're just going to do what you do, and it's a bit like saying, like, if I'm a storyteller, I need to get the right balance of grammar and storytelling. But actually, grammar should be internalized by then. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. Right. You're going to be, oh, where does this go? How does this fit together? So for me, I think that I spent a lot of time working out sort of how things fit together and cobbling together a kind of technique, I suppose. And I didn't really have many lessons as a kid on instruments. And so a lot of my learning was about experimenting and trying things out. And once that had been done, it was a matter of thinking, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to say? What's important to me? What emotional spaces can I describe? And that was that for me is the only reason I would ever create music. I would never create music from the point of view of I want to prove a concept, or I want to, you know, I want to generate a sort of algorithm or something like that. I'm more interested in building a language and then making something beautiful out of it. And so I think for me, the balance of science and soul, comes more from the way that I listen to music than the way I create it. And you can listen to music from a scientific point of view, like what's going on, what are the notes in that chord, how many divisions in every beat, what's the swing percentage, all that. That stuff's really interesting, you know. Like, for example, just one thing on swing percentages. If you have like, that's 50%. If you have like a 66% swing percentage, it's like the ratio is 2:1, I suppose. And then you can get like 80%. And like that steepness of swing is like super crazy. And you can experiment with how you want the groove to feel by messing with that, you know? And thinking, I want it to be like 57 is a favorite of mine, you know? Like, it's not, and it's not, it's, and that's so golden. That's so magical.
Can we get a round of applause?
Oh.
Thank you! you talked about respecting Quincy for someone who is just as accomplished as he is, and all of he's done, and he's always learning. If he's Quincy, he's learning, and I imagine that's how you must be too. What's most fascinating to you these days? Like, is it swing percentages? Like, what are you most like?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different facets of music.
But right now, though, like there must be
right
like a
now,
trend of the week or a theme of the week of what you're really just like.
zoned in on.
Yeah.
Well, swing percentages is interesting, as I just described. I'm trying to think of something else. I mean, there's a few different things. I guess you can think of music in terms of rhythm, melody, harmony, and sound. That's kind of how I think about it. And I've spent a lot of time in my life thinking about harmony, and we could talk about harmony for a long time, and rhythm as well, and that's where the swing percentages comes from. But for me, recently, actually, sound has been one of the most interesting things. I grew up in a household of music. There was lots of music in the house, lots of people who played music and spoke about music in the house, listened to music. But I didn't necessarily think about being an instrumentalist first. I thought about being a musician. And so one thing I've been really interested in recently and across my entire career has been recording sounds that aren't instruments and making them musical. And so, for example, you can take a saucepan or a lawnmower or a badminton racket. Those are good, actually. It's a lovely sound. And I've been sampling them recently, and I've been using them in grooves. And that, to me, is fascinating because everything's basically a musical instrument. That's not great, but it's still a musical instrument. That's more interesting, but I'm not my water. And so the idea of being thirsty for sound, it's funny because, you know, in musical education, of which I'm not the most well-versed, to be honest, but I've had a little bit of time within that, they don't talk about sound. Like they talk about tone, but they don't talk about sound. Distance, for example, like how far away is the sound? Where's it placed spectrally and beyond? And is it high or is it low? Is it breathy? Is it close? Is the toothpaste tube of air, or you know? I think about that stuff all the time, especially when I'm singing. And for me, the voice is the most powerful instrument of all time, and everyone has one, and that's why I think. But you know, you can if you choose to stack up your voice, as I do choose to sometimes, then if you go up like 20 times, it's going to be like, and if you go 20 times, it's going to be like, you know. And so just the idea of sound has been really tickling my fancy. I've been really pushing it recently, and I've been making I've made 4 albums. I've been making 4 albums over the last couple of years. It's actually a lot of work. It's like a 50-song album. I still don't know why I did it, but it's really fun. And each album is actually categorized by the amount of space around the sound. And so the albums are called Djesse, Djesse, Djesse. And Djesse Volume 1 is acoustic sound from a distance. It's orchestral music. Djesse Volume 2, which is this guy, is acoustic sound from a more a cozier distance, a smaller distance. Djesse Volume 3 is like negative distance, like negative space, electronics and craziness. And Djesse Volume 4 is the sort of like re-emergence of distance, where the listener is actually the music themselves, but that's a secret. I can't talk about that yet. And so I've been thinking so much about sound, just with regard to where it's placed in a space. And so I guess, yeah, in answer to your question, just people don't think about it enough, I think, in terms of learning how to make music. It's just like, where is the sound? Is it, or is it, you know? And that distance is life. That's what life is. It's distance, like, you know, distances.
It's amazing when you think about it. You're working on 4 albums. Well, I mean, you've put out 2, of course, already, over 50 songs. But you're also working on Coldplay's new album, or have worked, I should say. On
Yeah, I did
Coldplay's
that.
new album.
Yeah, that was really fun.
What did you do with them?
I can't remember the names of the songs. I actually should have done this research beforehand. But I'm on 3 songs on the new album. I think there's 9 songs in total.
Just text Chris.
Yeah, my phone's in the dressing room still. But yeah, they're such ambassadors for joy. I think, like, real joyfulness and sort of that feeling of everybody singing together. I don't know if you've seen that. There's an amazing there's amazing footage online of their Sao Paulo sort of stadium gig. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like multicolored, crazy. Everyone has these wristbands, and everyone's singing like, "Whoa!" And that thing is just so crazy. And so I've been a fan of Coldplay for a long, long time. And Chris and I have become friends recently, which is, you know, still rather surreal, but really cool. He's a lovely, lovely man. And yeah, he asked me if I wanted to sing on a few songs, and I said yes.
Right.
And then I did. And it was wonderful.
Right. But it's interesting what they're doing, right? It's 2 albums and one is more experimental.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think
Right.
I haven't properly done this research, as I say, but I think there's one. What are they called? What are the two albums called?
Is it? I don't want to missay it.
Spagherbert.
It's. I was gonna say one is sunset and.
Is it Sunset and Sunrise? Oh,
Is
something like
it
that.
something
I
like
can't remember.
that?
Yeah.
But did it? I mean, the reason I bring that up is that did Chris tell you why he reached out to you specifically? What he wanted you to specifically bring to the
Yeah.
new album?
Well, I wrote this. I composed this piece. It's the first song on the first volume of Djesse. It's called Home Is, and I'm not singing on it. Well, I am a tiny bit, but it's basically a choral piece of choral music. And Chris is obviously a real advocate of harmony and vocals, and I guess he stumbled across this song and was really taken with it, which is amazing. And he sent me an email saying, you know, who are you and where do you come from? And so I said, well, I'm Jacob and I come from London. And we hung out. We got on FaceTime, and I went to visit him in Los Angeles. And yeah, he liked the idea of me being a choir, I suppose, being the sort of Jacobian choir that I sometimes tend to be. And so I created these kinds of these vocal spaces, and I brought them to his songs and the band's songs. And it's lovely to hear it on the album. It's really surreal. But I was brought up listening to lots of English choral music, you know, sort of people like William Byrd, like really old school vocal writing, which has that kind of church feel. And so yeah, that sort of spirit I think Chris has been drawn to, and so I was interested in bringing that to that project.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it. It
Yeah,
comes
me
out
too.
next month. Let's get to Twitter really quick. We're gonna get a question here from at Kana Shimanuki, and Kana wants to know, "Hey Jacob, what's the best way to deepen knowledge of harmony and the emotional impact it has? What chord makes you feel what emotion?" Thank you. Let's kick it because I feel like we talked about a little bit of that, right? You want to kick it to the chord question?
Yeah. Excellent question. So there's no secret sauce, really. I would say just explore. In the same way that we explore language, we explore chords and we explore the way that they make us feel. One thing I used to do as a kid was add as many notes to a chord as I could until it got boring. And so you start with a simple chord like a triad, like do do do. It's like a C major chord, 3 notes. And then you add a D and a B and an A and an F sharp, and then you add a C sharp, and then you think, oh, that's really, really, really dense. And then you think, well, I could add a G sharp, and that's fine too. And gradually, you become acquainted with what these with what these notes are doing to the chord. And I think that the best way to learn something is to do it. Really, is to do it, because sometimes people think that thinking about things will give you skills. It's not really true. I mean, it will give you a sense of understanding, but the only way to really learn something is to do it. And I remember I did my first gig ever under my own name at the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland, and I was opening up for Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea, so these two giants, absolute legends. And it was with my one-man show, and I toured all around the world with a one-man show following that concert. But I went on stage, having imagined playing gigs, thought about playing gigs, worked on my concepts, and studied my chords, and enjoyed thinking about music all these different ways. And I'd, excuse me, I'd imagined performing, but the feeling of going on stage and performing was about 900% of the learning I'd ever done, based in performance, because I was doing it. Yeah. And I learnt at this accelerated rate. And I think that's true across the whole of your life, really, to be honest. You have to get yourself into a position where you're slightly on the edge of your own zone, on the edge of your own comfort zone, and trust yourself, because you're there. Like you will do something if you trust yourself. And so I went on stage and I did this gig, and no one had a clue who I was, other than Herbie and Chick, which is really cool. And that learning, I remember the visceral feeling of having learnt at that moment was so real time. It wasn't stop time, it was real time. And I suppose to go back to the question, I would say that the best way to learn a harmonic understanding is to put yourself in a situation where you're speaking that language in real time, whether it's improvising or whether it's harmonizing somebody singing or accompanying somebody. It's very important to use your vocabulary in real life. It's like if I sat and studied German from a textbook my whole life, and then I never went to Germany, I wouldn't really know how to speak German because I wouldn't have outed that knowledge. And so you can sit around all day and you can study chords as I did, and I would recommend you do, and think about notes and think about rhythms and space and ratios and whatever tickles your fancy really, and listening carefully. But making music is the best way to learn music, and I would just say make as much as you can, and don't be too precious, and don't wait for somebody to tell you that you should before you start doing it.
Right. Great. Let's get to some in-house questions. First is going to come from over here.
Hi.
Hi.
As much as I really want to ask about how you got Djesse to sing in G half sharp, I think my bigger question is, with all of this spectacular genre crossing that you've been doing recently, how is it that you sort of keep a sense of musical voice that is yours? How is it that you maintain
Interesting question. Yeah, no, that's a superb question, actually. Yeah, I do like to genre hop. It's a hobby of mine. And I think that really, because there are lots of people who want to find a sound that belongs to them, right? It's like, what's my sound? I would just say sing, because your voice is only yours and no one else has a voice like yours. And so for me, even though I don't really think of myself as a singer primarily, I think that the voice is the most musical, it's the most Jacobian DNA I can possibly give to any of my songs. And so even if it's just making sounds or humming really softly underneath, something, I think that provides a sense of me. But I guess also I just the fact that I've made these albums quite fast means that I can't help but to fall into structures that become familiar. And much as I like to challenge those structures, if you do something fast, it always has like a sort of whisker of you in it, because there's not enough time for you to extract it and then like sanitize it and return it to the, you know what I mean? If you go, then there's gonna be something of you in there. So, if I'd made 4 albums in 40 years or 10 years or even 4 years, I think there would have been a certain amount of make the idea and then sanitize the idea, figure out what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and then it's released, rather than making the idea, releasing it, and then maybe later figuring out what it was all about. And I like that process a lot, but it means that there's not much space or time for me to kind of remove myself from it, which is a good thing. And so, but all of the gestures that are important to me, they're the same gestures that were important to me 10 years ago. And if I listened to music I made when I was 14, 15, it was very much, I could hear that I was wanting to go to the same places I want to go to now. It's that I get tickled by the same stuff. And so what tickles you will haunt you. And I enjoy the haunting of my tickles. And so I guess I allow myself to be drawn to the things I'm drawn to. I try and sing as much as I can across the sort of sonic palette. And also I think just the fact that I'm producing it and mixing it and arranging it and performing most of the instruments sort of can't help but feel like it's me, whether for the better or for the worse. And I would say the same is true for someone like Stevie Wonder, who I figured out performs most of the instruments on his albums. And it smells like Stevie Wonder. It really does. It's like that Stevie Wonder in every way. But mostly because his gestures are so complete and they're so fundamental to his understanding. And I think that if you're fearless and you move without thinking too fast, you do shine through. And a lot of making music is about accepting what comes out of that, and because a lot of that's a bit weird. And if you do music making right, it's a difficult thing to do in certain ways, because you have to face yourself and you have to learn who you are and what comes out when you turn on the tap, and how much of that you can accept and refine and discuss, and how much of it is healthy to think about, and how much is healthy just to accept and realize is true. And then, I think for me, I've wanted to build myself a skill set that supports that process of explaining the parts of my life that I want to explain. And that is a long process. But I think that the moment it ceases to be connected to that feeling of catharsis, it will stop sounding like me and stop feeling like me, and I'll stop doing it because there'll be no reason to do it anymore. And I'm solving problems every time I complete something or put something together, because it's what I love to do so much, if that makes any sense.
Right on. Cool. We have time for one final question. It'll come from over here.
Hi, Jacob.
Hey.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for the music. It means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to everyone here. But my question, it's pretty related. I was just wondering what advice or encouragement you'd have to aspiring musicians who may not feel like they found their voice or their audience yet.
Yes, that's such an important question. Well, never let anybody make you smaller than you are. Don't wait for things to be possible before doing them, because they become possible when you start doing them. As Quincy would say, make a life, not a living. And the thing that I always mystifies me is when musicians want to have a career before they've figured out music, or before they've wanted to learn about music, or wanted to consider music. They want to be a musician or be a star even. That's very strange to me. I can't imagine how horrifying it would be to have a career and not be connected to yourself, because you would be so delocalized. It would be like studying. Well, it wouldn't be like studying. It would be like. It would be. You would feel so disconnected, and so for me, I think that the best thing to do is just to become as close as you can to your own structures, and get to know your own language first, and then try and make beautiful stuff, really beautiful stuff, and take time to do it, because everyone's in a rush the whole time, but actually there's not really a rush. A lot of people think that a career and music happens fast, and you have like one moment to go bang, and then a lot of the time that's what happens, and then those people end up with a lot of years of their life where they have to either live up to something, or they feel like they're moving downhill because they've had success early. And I think for me, I'm imagining this whole 4-album thing. I'm sort of plotting seeds for like 20 years time, and I'd love for people to trust me as an individual, and my job therefore is to figure out who that person is, and how best to explain myself, I suppose. And so I would say, yeah, don't think about having a career until you have enjoyed the feeling of failing at something and completing something and learning how that feels. And if people begin to listen to your music, that's a wonderful thing. But I think that the more important thing is for you to feel like if nobody was listening, you would still have to do music. It would be something that you would have to do because it's inevitable. I think I feel a bit like that. If you guys weren't here interested in me talking, I would probably still be having these ideas. And that for me means that I have a sustainable psychology, or more sustainable than kind of extracting a part of myself I think is of value, putting bright packaging on it, and then selling it to you. And there are so many people in the world who are selling you things. And a musician is a privileged thing to be, because you have the chance to be honest and helpful in a way that a lot of people in the media don't get to be. Because musicians can and when I say helpful, I mean if I do something that feels like me, and you see me in it, and you see that I see me in it, and you see yourself in it, then me not pretending is so valuable to you, because it's like cold water. It's like, that's so real. And a lot of the time we put filters on our lives, and we make things feel unreal for the sake of performance. And I'm concerned for the next generation, because that level of reality is the norm. It's like you perform your life and project it. And I would say that the best thing you could be as a musician is the best thing you could gift to the world as a musician is a vision of what they could be. And Glenn Gould, the classical pianist, once said that I think he once said that that the job of the artist is to increase the amount of available realities to the world, or something like that. And so that the listener is able to expand an idea of a space of what's possible, and who they could be, and remind them of their life, rather than setting a pedestal or inspire. It's like, what do you want to inspire? Like, you could inspire a sense of envy, or you could inspire a sense of glory, or whatever. But for me, I think it's about inspiring a sense of reality. Like, this is who I am. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to fit into your tidy little box of what would be helpful if I was. I'm going to be me. And that's, in my opinion, even though it sounds like a selfish thing, it's the most helpful I can be to you, because I'm being me, and maybe you will be you, or something like that. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I would just say be you, because nobody else has that ability, and we need you, because no one else can do that. And only you are able to explain the way you see the world. So like, explain the way you see the world, and get mucky in your fascinations for as long as you can, and don't wait to be fascinated, and don't rush into having a job or a career out of it,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great. Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, cheers.
I'm really lost up here. I'm just like, wow. Got a lot to learn in life. No, thank you so much, Jake. We're unfortunate at time, but this is really a pleasure.
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
Great meeting
Yeah,
you.
thanks so
Thank
much
you guys
for
for coming out.
Yeah.
And thanks.